Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Ian Brooks is the chief executive and founder of Rhodes Smith Consulting. He has been leading individuals and organizations through the process of intentional transformation for over 24 years. His clients include Netflix, Nike, Sony, Warner Brothers, Bank of America, Kaiser Permanente, among others. He is the author of the book Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story, which came out in the spring of 2021. The book integrates research, practical experience, and personal journey, guiding readers towards introspection and action. Dr. Brooks cherishes helping people move incrementally towards sustained achievements with a special focus on technical transformation, leadership development, coaching people of color and women for expanded roles, and assisting people to act with intention. Dr. Ian Brooks, it is a pleasure and an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
No, thank you for having me, Casey. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great. You told me just now, before we started recording, that you also have a background in personal training. Is that where you first got an interest in therapy and counting to 12 poorly?
Right. Actually, you know what? I thought it was a nice compliment to my background being a clinical therapist. I originally started being a therapist, or with the idea of being a therapist, when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
And wanted to help people. And of course, over the course of my journey of education and experience, I wanted to expose myself in different avenues of what other venues, aside from therapy or counseling, do we actually help people? And NASM and being a trainer was just a natural progression through that in a lot of different ways. In that context, both mentally and physically and both health-wise. That's also to say that I'm also a certified bartender too. So, I also work on the other end of that spectrum too.
That's great.
Because after the workout, you need a good drink.
That's great. Exactly. I love that. Something that definitely is not adding up at all is when we're talking about your age and all the things that you've experienced and how many years you've been in the field, but you look like you're 20 years old. Like you clearly have kept care of yourself and taken care of yourself. Like how old are you really?
Yeah, I'm actually 44 years old.
Wow, no way.
So, yeah. So it's I have to compliment, give kudos to my parents and the genes that I've been able to have, but also the balance of also how I live my life and try to be both mentally strong, physically strong, as well as spiritually strong. That way I'm not stressed. And I think oftentimes I see people and I look at them and kind of guess their age. They have a lot of wear and tear on them.
Sure.
Now again, part of it is the genes, but I think part of it also is how we actually live our lives. And I really try to be very conscious about that in the context of how am I interacting with the world and spiritually as well.
I love that. I'm so excited to deep dive into all of those topics with you today. I would love to hear a little bit about your career progression. You have done some very interesting things, like we said already. How did your career progress over time?
Sure. It actually started very, very early, as I mentioned, as a 13-year-old saying, hey, I want to be a clinical psychologist. And I was very purposeful in the actions and activities that I was actually targeting for myself, more specifically on where I was going to go to school, what degree I got. So for my undergraduate, got a psychology background. I went and got my master's in clinical psychology and started working in a 24-hour lockdown ward. Wow. So imagine coming in and working with clients who are straight off the street, who really do have a chemical imbalance, that they do really need the one-on-one therapy, the group therapy, and the medication. And potentially even coming from the jails as well.
Wow.
And
was that as gnarly as it sounds?
Yeah, yes, it was. Wow. Yes, it was. There were some days that were better than others, especially if they were just coming directly off the street or directly from jail. You could get some really unique experiences that, because of those unique experiences, I said, you know what? I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
I don't blame you. I couldn't do that.
But what I learned from a skill set standpoint of the active listening, the engagement, the listening to the stories that people had and their progression and how they were taking that and actually putting it back out into the world, it really stayed with me and afforded me a chance to say, you know what, now I want to transfer over and work with people, other people in higher functioning areas, such as organizations and even one-on-one. And so I made the transition over to working with organizations. So between that year of working in a clinical psych ward, I actually started working for the federal government for a year, and then went and moved here to Los Angeles to get my doctorate to work with organizations and people one-on-one. And that has afforded me an opportunity to work with a host of organizations, of which you've named some of them already. But it gave me that visibility of seeing people in a different context of our day-to-days, the people who we pass every single day on the street, or the people we interact with, you and I, and what we bring to the table. And really acknowledging that don't judge the book based on the chapter you walked in on. And that really affords us an opportunity to say, you know what, there's a lot more to you, Casey, than you right now. And there's a lot more to me and what makes me me and my foundation. And affording us that opportunity to say, that's okay, acknowledging that, but let's appreciate the moment and acknowledge that we all can be better in some way, shape, or form. And I've been able to do that with very intentional activities in my experience and career.
Wow. When did owning your own business become part of that mission and vision for you?
Sure. It actually came over a 15-minute conversation, actually, or 15-minute meeting. When I was one of my last full-time jobs, as you mentioned, or the role was actually at Bank of America, and one of the things that was happening around that time was around our housing crisis. And so, as you might recall, during that time period, a lot of the banks were understrapped, and they were consolidating and merging together. And as such, Bank of America, which is a really good organization, bought another organization I was part of. And as such, as you might imagine, we had a ton of people of whom had duplicate jobs.
Sure.
And so in that moment, what I realized as we were going through the process of identifying whom was going to be staying and who was going, and myself working with HR at that time, we had 15-minute conversations whereby we'd send an email to somebody 15 minutes before that meeting was to start to either inform them that their job was expanding or that they were going to be let go that day.
Wow.
Over the course of my time and duration there, that happened on a number of occasions. One where I was the actually participant of actually holding the meeting, as well as the participant of being invited to the meeting. And I recall one instance where I was invited to the meeting 15 minutes before. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be my last day. Okay, I'm already prepared. I'm already mentally there. And my work had been slowing down probably about a month before that. So I knew the writing was on the wall, or at least the tea leaves. So I said, I need to prepare myself. I need my own parachute. So I started already applying for roles. And I realized that the roles that I was applying for, they didn't fit my need, or I was just applying just to have a job, but they didn't have my interest. And I said, what job would I ever take right now that would really give me and afford me an opportunity to do what I want? What is it going to teach me that I can't teach myself, and or that I can't get through other experiences by having my own business? And so when I realized the answer to that question was there wouldn't be a job that would do that, that's when I decided to start my own business. Fast forward to me starting the business, and fast forward to that 15-minute meeting, they called me in, and they gave me another job with expanded responsibilities with a team of about 25
Wow.
people. And and I had my own business that I was already running as well. So it was a great opportunity, but I never lost my business. And that also taught me that, hey, I can be an employee or I can be an owner. I can also be both, but let's understand the priority, and let's make the cheap mistake as I'm going through this journey, holding on to the full-time job, but also having my full-time job as well, running my business. And I've done that ever since.
Wow. That's amazing. I just have so much respect for somebody who takes what seems like would be a horrible situation. You're going to lose your job, yet you took opportunity out of that. You used that word. It was an opportunity for you to go out and create something that you wanted. I look at this last year for a lot of people, and I wonder how many people squandered their chance to go create something after all the rules had changed. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. And it's actually one, as we'll talk about the book here momentarily, I suppose. But one of the things I talk about is building capabilities to transform your story. Capabilities is now you have the skill set. And I had been building my skill set that entire time. Also recognizing that having a capability means I have trust and confidence in what I'm doing to actually move out, and saying that the rules may change because we can't create and change the rules. But what we can do is how we react to that and trusting ourselves to move forward. And in my particular situation, I said, okay, the rules have just changed. Now, how can I take and empower myself versus being dependent or restricted or handcuffed in that situation? Or even, as you alluded to, Casey, over this last year, how can I empower myself to make this the best of the situation, because we're all going through it, and let's go. Let's have some fun with it.
I love that. That's such a cool approach and such a empowering way to approach difficult situations. I know how consciously you chose the word capabilities, and I'm glad that you wanted to go there because I do want to talk about that. The first thing that my mind went to, something that's really helped me as we've started our own business, is a yet mentality. Are you familiar with that kind of concept? Is that similar to what you're talking about when you're talking about capabilities?
Repeat that again. It's and yet.
A yet mentality basically means let's say like a year ago, if you would have told me like you're going to have to do accounting for your business, I would say like I don't know how to do accounting, but I could also say I don't know how to do accounting yet. That's not a skill I have, but I can go get that particular skill. Is that how you think of capabilities as well?
Absolutely. That's a perfect way of looking at it as well. And it aligns directly to capabilities, because we're not restricting ourselves in that respect. Actually, I talk about it in my book, defining it in the context of yes and. It's a confirmation of it, not a negative thing. It's like, I don't know how to do the taxes for my business. Great. And because of that, I'm going out here and solving that.
Yep. Yep.
And that's very an empowering piece to what you've just described for your business, as well as what I think as we consider capabilities and our choice on how we perceive certain actions, our choice in acknowledging who we are. But as important to all of those yet and ands, it's using it as a place of reference, not of resonant, whereby you're not being trapped and confined to the fact that you don't know that financial piece. I'm not trapped and confined because I don't know something or I don't currently do it. I have now a chance to do something about it. So now that's my choice.
Gotcha. As you look back, as your business has evolved personally, can you think of a time when those capabilities really shone through for you in your own experience, where you knew you needed to gain a certain skill and how that played out over time?
Absolutely. And starting my own business, obviously, as you just alluded to, we're not experts in everything. We don't know everything. And I think one of the first things I learned is don't try to do everything. Know what I was good at and know what I have a passion for, and knowing what I'm confident in doing, but also feeling confident enough where I can actually get the support I need, because I don't need to do everything. What's the stuff that I need to do because I'm the only one who can do it, versus what's the thing that I would like to learn, but I can pick this up along the way if I hire experts who do this every single day and it's their passions and they can assist me. That was one of the biggest learnings I took away, or have taken away consistently as a businessman, and starting the company, acknowledging there's so much drain and time that comes mentally and physically of trying to do everything, and acknowledging what am I really good at, and owning that, owning what can I reinforce for myself and still learn, while also acknowledging where can I just get the support I need, and knowing that I can trust somebody else to do it as well.
That's a great way to think about that. I'm just taking notes here. Dr. Brooks just told me I need to hire a 15-year-old to run our Instagram page. Is that pretty accurate?
Casey, true story. I'm not far off on that, because one of my biggest challenges, it has been going out and doing social media and going on Instagram and Twitter. I kid you not. It is something I have had to consciously think about every day. And it's not something that categorically is it hard? No, it's just typing up a few words. Heck, you and I connected on Instagram. It was very easy, right? It's not challenging, but it's not my go-to from an interaction standpoint. It's not necessarily that comfort level to build out all these things, right? This whole plan, right? It's like they grow up doing this stuff. Like, okay, I just need you to help set all this up. I'll give you the content. You go and have fun with it.
I love that. I love that. I need to take more of that approach. Social media is endlessly frustrating. I will, however, encourage the listener to go follow you on Twitter, because you are one of the bright beacons of light on Twitter. Twitter is one of my least favorite social media outlets. Yes. And you post a lot of really good positive tips and all kinds of good stuff that's really a bright spot on Twitter. So thank you for doing that. We're glad you're being consistent with it.
No, and I appreciate it. And it does come with a team of support. Again, just like we're talking about, like I have the content, and it's like, okay, team.
I'm gonna.
Now I need you to go help me do this. But it's one of those things that just know what you're good at, right? And it's also about being consistent too. Like I learn every day going on Twitter and going on Instagram, and the things I'm not comfortable with are likely the places I need to be playing anyway. And so that's where I start to see my growth. And heck, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah,
right?
That's a really great approach. I love that. When did the word intention first kind of grab hold in your mind as something that's really important and something that we're missing, and over time became something that you wanted to release content about?
Yeah, I wanted something that really captured our attention. And as I thought about our journeys in our own stories, and as we put that in the context of transformation in our personal journey, we have to be purposeful. We have to be consciously thinking about what we want in order for us to change, especially early on. Too often, I was finding through my clients of whom I was working with, they were really struggling with that front end piece of really defining what they wanted, but also how to go about it. And when I put it in the context of the how, that really gets down to the behaviors. And the behaviors really, for me, start with what's in your mind? What are you thinking about? What do you think about every day? Because half the time we're just on autopilot, right? We make, 2,000 plus decisions each day. So most of those, 95% of them, we're on autopilot, right? We're not even thinking about it. Driving to school, driving to work, tying our shoes, taking a shower. We're not even thinking half the time. So imagine 95% of what we do, we're not even really thinking about. And so when we're actually trying to change our behaviors and trying to do something different, we're now trying to put it into the forefront of our minds, which we're not necessarily always doing, especially on a day-to-day basis or moment-to-moment basis. So when I thought about the word and the title of the book, I wanted it to really encapsulate really what we need to be paying attention to. And through that is intention of our behaviors, intention of our thoughts, intention of our surroundings, and also acknowledging that we're building capabilities, not for an endpoint, that we have a finish line, but through behaviors that can be transferable to different situations and scenarios, because that's how we get to our ability to sustain.
It's interesting when you say the phrase, like you need to sit down and you need to really think about what you want for your life. The first thing that I feel, if I'm really paying attention to what emotions rise, is something that's talked about by Stephen Pressfield in the book, The War of Art, which is resistance. I feel like, yeah, I should definitely sit down and think about what I want. So let me do that tomorrow. Let me do that another time. It seems like we have that internal resistance to making ourselves better. And it's such a simple thing to sit down and do and really contemplate. And it's so important, it can change your life. But it's also something, did you notice that most people have that same kind of resistance to doing something like that?
Yeah, they really do. And I say let me put that in context. I even have resistance to it because we all have it, right? It's just how does it show up and come about? It could be the little voice in our minds that tells us that we're not good enough. It could be, or offering judgment, gives us that fear, walks us off the ledge and brings us back to our confines and safety. It's really, we don't afford ourselves the opportunity to pause. And going back to our previous conversation regarding the last year of what COVID has afforded us, it forced us all to sit down, take away all that noise and distraction and get lost in our thoughts. It gave us an opportunity to really say, where am I true purpose? What is my true purpose? Excuse me. Where are my resistance points? And I found even when this book was originally started, well before COVID and written, people still struggled with that idea. And we don't give ourselves that chance to actually pause. And most of the time when we're solving a problem, it's when that problem's on our doorstep. I need to lose weight because I'm already overweight. Or I need to get healthy because I'm already not healthy. Or I need a job because I've already ran out of money. It's like, well, no, like we can apply this to our building our capabilities. And I harken it to a quote from an author by the name of Niccolo Machiavelli, and in his book, The Prince. And he says, it's a common fault of men not to reckon on storms in fair weather.
Wow.
And I think that just summarizes everything that we saw with our resistance.
So true.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember I wanted to be really respectful about this, and I didn't want to stir the chili or make people feel bad about the situation of what was happening. But I remember very early on the shutdown, like making a post that said, look, like we were trying to get you guys to get on board with some of this stuff. We needed you to be more resilient and be stronger. And, we told you to eat well and get lots of sleep. And now we have this really stressful situation, and push is going to come to shove with the people who took the time to take care of themselves are probably going to do a little bit better. So
Absolutely.
I hope people learn those lessons. I love that quote. I am definitely stealing that.
Oh, feel free. I'm paying it forward. It's a great book. But you're absolutely right. And when we get in these situations, the people who are already healthy, well, guess what? The gym shut down, had to socially distance, et cetera. Guess what? They were already found other ways in their life to exercise and maintain their health, both mentally and physically.
Mm.
For those who struggled, they were already struggling before because they had built routines that were myopic. It was only based off of, hey, I only lose weight when I have that trainer. And guess what? Guess what happens, right? After you leave the trainer, how well do you sustain?
That's right.
Most people don't, right? And so I think in a more obviously global scale, this past year, for those people who are already doing it well and just part of their fabric of who they are as a person, they had the abilities already. They already had the routines and consistency. They had a little bit easier time in that respect than I say others.
Mm. Interesting. I think it can be really daunting too. If you've never really thought about some of this stuff, they would look at somebody like you, very successful, talks about intention in your book, has a great message to share. And I think, wow, that's, coming from the Tao Te Ching, that's like 10,000 steps away. Here I am. I haven't even started to consider some of these things. What tips and tricks would you suggest for people who are just getting started, modifying some of their own behaviors to achieve a better level of happiness in their lives?
Yeah, just start. I say that while I'm speaking as an expert, speaking as an author, but I'm also speaking as someone who's going through it as well. Again, as I described my social media piece, that's just a microcosm of many other things that I challenge myself with. But I'd say the very first thing as we're going through this experience of wanting to get started is first have the confidence. When you have confidence that you know you can achieve something, that's the first thing. That confidence then leads itself to being vulnerable. Because when you're vulnerable, that's when your confidence is really going to be tested. Be vulnerable to the possibilities. Be vulnerable to ask the question, and more importantly, hear the answer. Hearing the answer, not from a judgment standpoint, but from an acknowledgement perspective. And those questions really evolve for us all. So I often get the question of when I'm starting, well, how do I know? Well, you're asking the question, so you've already started. But now let's focus on, where do you think the challenge is? Where do you think your challenges are? What are you not as comfortable with? And that could be you're already successful, and now you want to expand on that. Or you're uncomfortable because this is not right where you want to be. Or is it uncomfortable because someone else is making you uncomfortable? And so once you understand where that discomfort is coming from, now you're in a position of power to say, now, what do I want to do with that? So that first starts with our discovery, and then moves into who we are as people. And then we can start on that journey.
Gotcha. And I'm so glad you mentioned that. And it's so cliche, and we say it all the time, but the joy and the beauty really is in the journey. Again, like the point, like people would look at you and see this book, and it's this tactile thing, and say like, wow, this dude's arrived. He's enlightened and just floating around, his life. But we're all in the quagmire and trying to figure things out day to day. But that's where I love the feeling of, presence, increased presence to appreciate that wherever I am now is not where I'm going to end up, but it's definitely a little bit further than I was yesterday.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's about the progress, because we're going to get into situations that are going to test our fortitude. They're going to test the behaviors that we thought we learned, right? And that's okay. That tells us that we're growing. That tells us that we're now being asked to reinforce what we just did. And sometimes we fail because we're a one-trick pony, right? We can do this. Yeah, I can do this one time and that's it. But that's not change. That's not a transformation. That's just a change. I can get anyone to change one time. Heck, that's that. But if we really want to build this into the fabric of who we are, it's about expanding ourselves and testing ourselves out in ways that really are going to make us and enable us to grow, to the extent that we're no longer thinking about it. It's now just we're responding.
Sure.
to the actions, what we're going to.
Sure. How often do you have to help your clients modify their wants, their desires, their goals to align in a way that helps them to become more happy? Do you notice quite a bit that people say they want a certain something without really realizing that that's not truly what they want, or maybe that's not totally in their control?
Yes, I do it quite often. And it really starts on the front end, where I start identifying like, hey, you want to achieve a goal of losing weight. Okay, great. All right, that's a wonderful and admirable goal, which is a very good thing. But the reality is, what are you willing to do? Like, what are you willing to do for that? Because what often happens, people are only looking at an end result. They're looking at, I want to lose the weight. I want to make more money. I want a new job title. What they lose sight of is what's that journey in the path. So up front, even before we take any level of action, one of the things that I really reinforce with the individuals of whom I work with is really expanding their perspective on their dot. And it's an exercise I go through that I describe in my book, Intention. Took it from a research study whereby a teacher drew a dot on a chalkboard for kindergartner students and asked the kindergartners, what did they see? They came up with some 50 different answers. She did the same exercise with a group of high school students. And those high school students came up with maybe 1 to 3 items. And it goes to show that as we get older, and as we go back to my earlier statement of like we're running on autopilot quite often, when we see something, we see it as a question or a challenge. We're only looking at that dot. We only see what we need to see to answer the question and move on. So when I'm actually working with my clients, I'm always and consciously looking for them to expand their dot, to see the black space on that chalkboard as much as they see that dot, because that dot is nothing more than a culmination of the pixels of that blackboard and the possibilities of what we're seeing. That really then transforms itself into what behaviors and actions is that individual willing to take. So to your question of do I change their perspective or change their direction? That answer is yes. And it also aligns back to even the behaviors in which we're targeting for their plans. Again, it's like, what are you willing to do? Because not everyone's willing to do the same thing to get to the same result, which is perfectly fine. And you don't have to. But let's acknowledge that up front so that when we define and reframe success and reframe our end result that we're looking for, now we've put ourselves in a position of power. So we're not deflated based off of a result that we were never going to be able to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like the first way, setting up the goals, like you mentioned, like getting the promotion, having a relationship, like those are not necessarily in your control. You might be setting yourself up for years and years of disappointment if your goal is to get a promotion that may or may not ever come your way. But if you make yourself a good worker, you set yourself up pretty well. And if you base your success on that, then you can succeed. You can't be loved in a relationship. You can make yourself be lovable and be a good listener and show up for the relationship. And that makes it more likely that it's going to happen. And then you're not attaching all of your, happiness to outcomes, but it's like you mentioned, you're attaching it more to behaviors. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And you'll find that I love quotes, but there's one by Jean Sartre that goes, when you hear details of victory, it's hard to distinguish it from defeat. So in our minds, we think, oh my God, this is everything I want, this title, this lost weight, I could fit into X, or I look Y, I have this relationship, Z. When you don't get it, it's all of a sudden like, okay, now I got to start from scratch, or I failed. And it's like, no, that's not necessarily true. In fact, your failure may be a great thing because at that point, one, you're learning, or secondly, you weren't on the right path. And as you said, it's that incremental steps of being able to take that forward and really allowing ourselves to really reframe what success really means more on the behavior side and the consistency of that behavior versus a true singular outcome.
Yeah, I think we see this all the time in the fitness world where somebody is training for this contest, they're training for a marathon or an Ironman, which are amazing events, and the event comes and the event goes in the blink of an eye. And people get kind of down after those things happen because I think they realize like everything I wanted never really made me that much happier. All the magic was the 5 a.m.s that I had to wake up on Tuesday that I didn't want to. And I went and did this one workout 4 months out before my event. That's where all the magic comes. It's that training and showing up and being consistent.
Right. Absolutely. And oh yeah, by the way, the marathon and then the Ironman is just an event. And when we treat our lives like they're events, then we lose sight of what's that journey and as important, what's that routine and who we are. Again, I've run into people like, hey, I want to lose weight. Well, heck, why don't you do a juice cleanse for a week? I can almost guarantee you'll lose some weight. So check the box and we're done. Is that healthy? Is that sustainable? No.
Yeah.
But if that's all you're looking for, you don't need me, right? You don't need me to do that. I just solved your problem. Now go forward and be prosperous and save your money. But if you want something else, now let's have a conversation about that. And that's where I think people really don't they don't trust themselves enough for that benefit to integrate it in their lives because that takes so much work.
Yeah.
And it is draining.
Interesting. In your book, you talk about people's stories and the different characters and the set and the script and everything in the book. I really love that concept. Can you educate the listener a little bit about that and why you included it in the book?
Sure. For the listeners' backdrop, early on in the book, I do talk about, obviously, as we're transitioning our stories, we are the authors, the narrators, the actors, creating our own environment around our stories. And as such, we are also the characters, and we bring certain characters to our world and to our life. In particular, it's not characters of, oh, I'm a brother, I'm a father, I'm a janitor, I'm a fitness expert. Those are titles bestowed upon us. When I'm describing characters I am Mr. Know-It-All. In those situations, I think I know everything. Or I am Mr. Degree, because I need to validate my existence and thoughts with having a degree. Or I'm the abominable snowman from the old Bugs Bunny cartoon, where the abominable snowman, all he wanted to do was love his rabbit, but he was choking him and trying to kill Bugs Bunny. But all he was trying to do was love him. We have these types of characters in our lives, and they show up in different times and places, where we've created relationships and meaning towards how we interact with life and how we see certain levels of importance. And that'll show up when we're going through changes because those characters are intended to keep us safe. We've learned these behaviors across our lives. And to the extent of, just imagine if you go home and you fit a certain role when you go see your parents or your siblings or your friends versus where you currently live with your significant others or your friends in a different place. Or you're a different person, or you show up differently when you go to an office and you're now interacting, or you have a different relationship of who you are and what you feel like when you actually go to a gym and now are being seen in front of everybody. These characters of which we represent and bring to the table influence our perspectives as well as our actions as we're thinking about we want to transform. And it's just acknowledging who we are in our characters up front, because we can't detach from situations or pretend that those characters don't matter, because they do, right? They keep us safe and have kept us safe. And it's to acknowledge that this is who I am. This is my character or characters, plural. And this is the type of character that's actually going to help or hinder me as I move forward. And maybe that character now needs just to be put to rest and served its purpose to date. And in order for me to move forward, I have to let a character go or transform that character as I go through my journey. But that all comes back down to who we are as people and how we provide intention.
So how practically can somebody do that? If they feel like they've identified a negative self-talk, some story that they're telling about themselves that doesn't align with where they want to be, what practical things can people do to have more intention and to change that story? Is it, you have to, do you write things down? Do you, is it a meditation practice? Like, what are some of the best things you'd recommend?
Sure. First thing I would recommend is to own it. Own the characters. Be in own whatever you're thinking and feeling because it's real, right? It's these aren't negative things. They're not judgments. It's owning who you are. The second piece in that and saying, now think through, is this helping or hindering me? Is this character helping or hindering me? Is it realistic? Am I making certain assumptions about myself that I have carried forward that are no longer serving a purpose? Once we do that, being in the moment and acknowledging that character or that moment, then the second step, acknowledging where we are and how is that behavior or that thought process helping or hindering me? And is it even realistic? That now affords me a chance to now be empowered to now take a different action. It affords me an opportunity to either write down a different plan. It affords me an opportunity to even just check my emotions right then and there. And I do this quite often with myself. I talk about this a little bit in the book as well when I was doing my audiobook recording. And I just was a nervous wreck in all points of both my pace of speech. I didn't like the content, so I was constant in my own head in judgment of what I was saying, to the extent that at the end of the first day, I literally just sat at the end of a bar because I needed a drink. And I just sat and I just let the emotions come to me, not without judgment or not to judge myself or anything else, but just let it come. And what was I thinking? And then I said to myself, oh, and I took myself through this very exercise and said, what assumptions am I making? And as importantly, once I got to that answer, I then said, am I done? And that was extremely important to say to myself. And I do that consistently when I get caught in that mind space. And by saying, am I done? It affords me a chance to say, okay, you can beat yourself up. These thoughts and characters can keep you in a safe place. You now know what you need to do or how you can take corrective action. You've given it some thought. What we're not going to do is continue that.
Wow. Did you notice a difference as you continued recording that audiobook, at least the first go round? I know you ended up redoing it, but did it help you the next day?
Yeah, it really did help me the next day. And to the extent I was rejuvenated that night to actually rewrite parts of the remaining parts of the audiobook. I took the learnings that I had from the previous day and applied them to that very next day. So I felt a lot more confident in my voice, more confident in even some of the writing. And I was my emotion and feeling about it was like a 180 compared to what I felt that first day.
Wow.
Now, that being said, I still did not roll out or launch that audiobook because it afforded me to take some other actions and just scrap the whole thing. But what it afforded me the chance to do in a live setting, going back to your question of how does someone do this in real time and practical tips, I really took ownership of my thoughts and emotion, got it out, and said, am I done? And now let's move forward.
That's great. Yeah. That's part of why I love your content so much is it is practical. It is easy to apply. It's maybe not easy, but it's simple. Like it's not overly complicated. You talk about a concept as well, PACE, P-A-C-E as an acronym. Can you go into what that means and break that down and which ones are most important to you?
Yeah, I think the entire, I think that all of them are really, or it's an acronym, but I think each part of that acronym really does afford an opportunity to really own our own direction and own what we do and how we do it. It's an opportunity for us to sit down and really acknowledge that we are the owners and purveyors of who we are and what we do. And it starts with ownership of what I've termed in the book, which is PACE. Now, P stands for patience. As we're going through transformations, we need to give ourselves some level of patience because we're not going to get everything done all at once. So because of that, and acknowledging that there are no shortcuts in building a capability, there are no shortcuts in creating more situations that will reinforce and sharpen your capability. So because of that, give yourself a level of patience as you're going through the journey.
This is why I needed you to define this, because I read patience and got stuck there. That's where I live. Like I never give myself enough patience.
Right. We don't give it. But you know what? And the reason even in part of the book, now I'm going to jump forward for a moment around each one of the, at the end of each one of the parts, I ask people to pause, process, and reflect, forcing ourselves to give ourselves that patience to think and think about it and reflect on what we've just done, because we don't give ourselves patience. We just want that end result.
Yes.
Right. I just want it. I see it. I see what people are doing on Instagram. I need to be that person.
Yep.
It's like they just didn't arrive there. They had their own process. So we have to give ourselves that level of allowance, if you will. The A in the PACE is accountability. This is your story and your story only. Unlike other areas where accountability may be acquiesced and given away, this is all about enablement for you and about you. And it's your story. And it's not for anyone else. Now, when people hear the word accountability, they get scared, right? They think about the success. They think about what victory is and what defeat is. And it's like, well, yes and no. Accountability is, did I do what I said I was going to do? In that moment, did I do it? Now, it doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean that anything other than did I take the action? The C is for commitment in PACE. Commit to it. Give yourself even just the slightest of chances to do what you say you're going to do. Again, we all live parallel lives on paper. And everything sounds good when we write it down. And part of your commitment is to think through what you want. But also your commitment is to actually take some level of action on it. Give yourself that chance. Think about your commitment as that marathon or ultra marathon versus a sprint. Commit to yourself. Give yourself the time. Give yourself like, hey, I don't have to do everything at once. And the last thing that I'll say is just around enjoyment. I think one of the things that I often see for people and of whom I'm coaching, and we're going through enjoyment, but also the emotions that come along with that. So I was playing with the E, going back and forth, but it's enjoyment and your emotions. Number one, your enjoyment. Enjoy what you're going to be doing. It's not always enjoyable. Sure. It really isn't. It's always going to be a struggle. In that, you will have various levels of emotions, right? This gets us down to our thinking, doing, and feeling. Our emotions are going to come out of us. Our frustrations will come out. Our fears will come out. Own it. It will take an emotional toll on you. And that's okay, and it's expected. But what that also means, that's also growth. And now just empower yourself to have that emotion, but also enjoy the journey.
I love that. I'm so glad you went there. That's great. I have another E word that I mull around all the time. I get really confused by it. And it's really tough to know. The E word is enough. You just mentioned it when you said, like, you're not going to do this all overnight. Give yourself a little bit of grace, be patient. How do I know? When do I know that my work for the day, the week is enough? When do I close my laptop and say, I did what I could? When do I enjoy a meal and Netflix on the couch? When do I know that whatever work I've done is enough? Because we came from this corporate world of like, your goal is just more than what you did last month. And it was just so unsustainable. And you're just running around like more sales, more clients, more sessions. And finding the level of enough has been a real challenge. How do you think about that word?
Yeah, I think about it, and I think a lot of people struggle with that word. And I look at it in two different aspects. When I hear the word enough, I think of an endpoint. And as everything that you've described, and as you think about from a sales perspective, we think about it from a corporate America perspective, we think about it, heck, even at the gym, right? When is enough? It's enough when we can sit down and say, I gave my all today, both from a mental perspective from an energy perspective, and anything more is diminished returns. Enough isn't defined through, I just lost these 5 pounds. Enough isn't defined as, I got these extra sales. Because as you mentioned, there'll always be another sale that I need. There'll be another sales goal. There will be another 5 pounds I want to lose. There'll always be something. And so when I hear the word enough, I think about not in terms of an endpoint of that sale or weight or whatever that, hey, I'm ready to just close it down. For me, when I'm looking at my days and I'm looking at my actions, I think to myself, did I put myself in a better position now than I did at the beginning of the morning? Be it mentally, physically, emotionally. That also, in that very statement and acknowledgement, also means that I'm not always doing. Enough might mean I just sat at the pool all day and sipped on a Mai Tai.
I love that.
That was enough. And that was effective because that's what I needed. It's really giving ourselves allowance to create that holistic view in ourselves, because if we go through transformations and we're doing something new, again, going back to the word emotions, it does take an emotional toll and physical toll. So we can't always be thinking, we can't always be doing. So our enough might be, you know what, I only could give you 20% today. That's all I could give you because that's all I had. And that's enough. And if that only means I was only with you for 20 minutes or an hour, then that's okay. If I was there for 8 hours, then I'm not going to be any good for you because I'm already burnt out. I'm not thinking, I'm just reacting, or then I get frustrated and annoyed. And now I've got other emotions that are coming out. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I think that's very, very well explained. We recently, my wife Bethany and I, business partner and best friend, have been studying a little bit of Stoicism recently. That's been really fun to read about and learn about. And, the dichotomy of control, the things you can and can't control. We've talked a little bit about that today. I see this thing happen, especially with really close relationships, where when one person tends to be like kind of growing and changing a little bit and trying to seek their better self, it can almost cause some resistance in the partner. And I'm wondering how would you recommend supporting somebody who is going through this process and is trying to live more intentionally? What things do they need from a partner for support in that state?
You hit it on the head, and that is just support. And that support in particular, especially for our significant others who may or may not be coming along this personal journey with us, they are in our environment. So our environment, being our people, places, and things, are going to be impacted by what we do. In your particular example, as you described with you and your significant other, it's a function of, I might be going on this personal journey. Are they coming along with me? In the context of, let's have a conversation. Do they understand the reason I'm going on this journey? Do they feel like they're a part of it, but they don't necessarily have to do the things that I am doing or try to influence me in a way that detracts or derails that path? How is that going to change our relationship? And talking about that overtly and being honest about it and knowing that we want what's best for each other, especially from that perspective. Also, there's nothing wrong with having extended support teams. So I recall being a part of an accountability group of 5 gentlemen. We'd all come once a month to the same location and we would just talk. None of the other 4 individuals had any context or otherwise or affiliation with what I was doing or what I was trying to achieve, as much as they were there for support, offering a listening ear and lens, offering an objective perspective outside of how I could actually be moving forward, both in my career and in my personal life, acting as a sounding board. But those are individuals of whom can offer support, not as a reinforcement, not as a crutch or dependent or individuals, even my significant other, to try to keep me where I am. And it's important to keep tabs on that as well and being very conscious of our environments around us. Again, extends beyond just the people. It also goes to the places and things in our life and how we've treated them and how and what they expect from us in return and what they mean to us from an emotional and physical standpoint. And
So,
so being conscious in the moment is extremely key in that.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're taking what could be a potential challenge to a relationship and actually using that to make the relationship stronger.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And seeing where there might be differences. And does the other person, if they don't agree with that direction, let's say, all right, instead of working a 9 to 5, I'm going to start my own business. We're starting tomorrow. Like, oh, okay. Well, what about the house? What about the kids? What about all these bills? And if you just say, hey, we're just going to figure it out. If someone's not on board with that, now it's a conversation of what makes sense, because while we are taking a personal journey on choice and action, again, we are impacting those around us and how they've interacted with us before. So we're changing their story by changing ours.
Mm. That's great. I think another cool thing that I love about some of these concepts, you must see this all the time, where you may have been hired by a high performing CEO that's trying to improve the way he communicates with his company, but the skills and capabilities that he learns then trickles down into other areas of his life. And the one that keeps coming to mind for me would be parenting, not only dealing with your own children and raising them in a way that they have space to become what they need to become, but also dealing with, the downloaded software programs that are running in your background from your parents and dealing with those as well. Is that something that you notice as you work with more people?
Yes, absolutely. I recall having a client. She was divorced with 2 children. Yet when I started working with her, it was around a work problem or work challenge that she needed some assistance with. As you just spoke about, what we were challenged with was transferring her behaviors, both from the workspace, but also reinforcing it in her personal life with her children and how she interacted with them. So not only was I building a plan or helping her build a plan around her work and interactions with her peers and her boss on communication, engagement, and not allowing her emotions to take over, but just to acknowledge them. She also had to do some reprogramming for how she interacted with her children, because those same behaviors and habits and templates of which she formulated transferred over into her personal life, to the extent that we built out a plan to have a family dinner once a week, and that she would take her daughter out every other week. And then for her son, she would do the same thing on that opposite week, where it was just the two of them, to really reformulate that relationship and really build it back up in a way that was healthier and more of a two-way conversation and dialogue than what was actually happening, and was creating some challenges. But those same challenges in her personal life were actually happening, and the same challenges she was having in her work life.
Right. Yeah.
And so she was having to do the same thing. So it is really interesting, to your very acknowledgement, that we are not our 4 walls might change, but who we are and the characters we bring are very consistent. So if I'm a bad communicator now, at work, I'm likely a bad communicator in other areas of my life as well.
Yeah.
And
Great.
how does this show up?
Wow. I mean, just as you say that, I'm so happy for her that she chose to do that, because I'm thinking back, I was fortunate enough to have those special days or special evenings with my mom. And I remember the memories. I don't know what we talked about, probably nothing important, but those are special times. She's creating space to go create memories with her children that should be very fond memories in the future. That's amazing. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, absolutely. And strengthen the relationship. And it was just about being present, less about the topics of which is being described. And as I like to say, we'll always remember the story. And that's it at the end of the day. We won't remember the details and the challenges, and even the challenges and the details we do remember, we laugh at afterwards. Not in the moment, but we laugh at afterwards.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, all we do is remember the story. And that's the fun part.
Yeah, very well said. We have to ask you, we mentioned earlier in the show, you are very fit, you take care of yourself. What are some of the other health and fitness things that you implement and leverage in your life to live a healthy and happy life?
Sure. And I will caveat this by saying, I don't always eat healthy. I don't always work out. Right? But it is about the consistency. I listen to my body, and I listen to how I'm feeling that day, both emotionally and spiritually. So in that, now with that caveat being said, I do work out very regularly, and I keep my routine. And from a workout, going to the gym perspective, being it working out, lifting weights, or from a cardio perspective to start off, for me, that's a therapeutic time to get lost in my thoughts, invest time in myself. So even when I'm working out and on a daily basis, working out for an hour, making sure I'm committed to what I'm doing. So I'm not, goofing off in the gym. I don't have even though I know a lot of people at the gym, try to limit my conversation so that I'm there for a purpose of both physically and mentally getting set. I also changed my routines up to create, shock my body every 3 months, just to make sure that I'm creating the newness and building the different muscle fiber. That's no different than any other change when we create those pain points in our minds, in our actions, when we're trying to change our communication ability, or in this woman's case, having different relationships with her children. I also couple that with how I eat and shop. So I can tell you for about a 2-year period, I didn't cook one meal at my house because I was traveling so much.
Wow.
But I was very conscious on when I was ordering, what am I ordering? What time of day is it? And not restricting myself in any context because, at the end of the day, it gets tiring and it's like, I just want a steak or I want a pizza. But acknowledging that that's not an everyday activity, but I'm trying to invest nutrients in my system and soul that reinforce the work that I'm putting in at the gym as well. And so it's a lifestyle approach. And then finally, as you're probably well aware of, and probably even the listeners, I go to the grocery store, just stay on the outside to shop. Never go on the inside to the extent possible. Or when I do, it's, obviously for the more household products rather than food. And that helps me keep grounded as well. So even if I am tempted to sneak in a few things, it's less likely to happen. And I'm just very conscious about that. But also recognizing that I feel a lot better as a result of that as well.
The phrase invest nutrients, I'm stealing that also. That's going to be on one of our hats or shirts or something. That is a great way to think about it. I love that.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's awesome.
And that's truly what I think about it. But it's not only food, it's the books we read, the people we surround ourselves with. There's so much nutrients and so many things that, and in this case, it just happens to be food as well.
Yeah. Wow. Dr. Brooks, I mean, you've started your own company. You've written a fantastic book. You have worked with very high level people. You've accomplished a lot in your life. When you look back at this point at everything that you have done, what are you the most proud of? It could be something big or it could be something small.
Yeah, I think I'm proud of, take it away from one particular piece, but I'm proud of always owning my voice, or more specifically, doing what I'm saying I'm going to do. And this is where it even ties back into intention. Like when I put out a goal to write my book, that was four years since I started, and then it got released. Now I had its ebbs and flows, some horrible days, some days I didn't feel like writing, some days I wrote the same thing 3 times just to make myself feel better. But I reached that goal because that's what I'm passionate about. It was no different than me as a 13-year-old saying I want to get a PhD in psychology. I met that goal because it's what I had purpose for and what I knew I wanted. I'm most proud of those in those particular instances, and the tracks and even the smaller intentions I've had in my life, to say I'm proud of those moments, because that showed me that and demonstrates, one, that I was committed. It demonstrated that, regardless of what I was going through, I knew what I wanted. And I can't dictate time. I can't dictate every day, everything's going to be perfect, or my will is always going to be there. But I did get it, and I did do it. And so I'm most proud of that mentality. And most recently, again, it's showing up in the culmination of my book being released earlier this year.
That's so cool. I love that. Man, there's so many great gems of wisdom in this conversation. I'm so glad that you took the time to come with us today and talk to us about your experiences and your journey and your wonderful content. If you had to leave the listener with one thing and nothing else, what one thing would you tell the listener that they could apply in their lives and see benefit?
Yeah, there's quite a bit, but I think the one thing that I would say, and I'm going to reinforce, is ensure that you have a solid foundation because your life will be a lot easier as you move forward. And I'll say it a little bit differently through a quote, again, through this Niccolo Machiavelli book, because it just, that book really spoke to me. And oh yeah, by the way, it was written in 1532. So it was really,
Wow.
really to hear these quotes and on leadership and otherwise really portended here in the future. But he wrote that let's get this right. He who does not lay his foundation beforehand may by great abilities do so afterwards, although with great trouble to the architect and danger to the building.
Wow.
And that's, if you think about that quote, you're laying a foundation of capabilities so that you can move forward and scale in different scenarios. That work you put in up front will make your life so much, I'm not going to say easy, because change and our perspectives of doing things differently is never easy, but affords you a strong foundation of which you can accomplish just about anything. If you don't do so, as the quote says, it could be a lot of trouble to us to go back and recreate so much that we thought we knew about ourselves but didn't. And it could also be in danger of our building. So the things we start moving, no different than a Jenga game, when we move that block, our tower may come down. And now we have a bigger challenge. So afford yourself the opportunity to really establish a solid foundation as you embark on any change, because that's where you're going to really begin to see true growth and true sustainment.
Wow. I love that. I love the concept of gaining those capabilities over time, and then you just never lose them. They come with you to help you with challenges you face in the future. That's great advice. I love the quote. I love thinking about the foundation. Where would you like us to send people to connect with you and your work, and where can they pick up your book?
Sure. Yeah. So again, thanks for having me here. For more information about me and about what I do from a coaching standpoint, both individuals and groups, and even about my book, listeners can go to rhodessmith.com. That is RHODESSMITH.com to find more information about my book, leadership, et cetera, and about me, news in the press. And obviously this podcast will be on there as well. I can be found on Instagram and Twitter at Dr. B_intention. That's Dr. B_intention. As Casey mentioned, I have a lot of updates there. And my book, Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story, can be found on my website or on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And there will be an audiobook version coming out here in the next month.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. Well, we'll link to all of that in the show notes. We are so grateful for you and your work. We're so glad that you put all of your thoughts down on paper and we're able to share that with the world. We're so grateful for everything that you've done. Dr. Ian Brooks, author of Intention, Building Capabilities to Transform Your Story. Thank you so very much for taking the time to be a guest on our show today, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
That sounds great, Casey, and thank you for inviting me. Absolutely. Wonderful conversation.
It was great. We learned a lot, and it was an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.